1 or 2 minutes. Yeah, we are going to be limited to just 1 or 2 minutes apiece. So all you'll have time to do really is tell us the name of the book, the author, and just a very brief reason why you really enjoyed the book. So I think this will be fun, and we'll ask when you finish your little session, if you will put the author and the title of your book in the chat box. Then we have a secretary who's going to take notes of all of that, and then we'll share the list of everyone's books on Connect so that people who couldn't get in or who just want to listen in and just read a book that's recommended, that'll be fun. So I'm going to take this off now. And I'm going to start. So the book I chose is the scrapbook. Oh, I'm going to ask everyone else to mute until it's your turn to speak. That just helps cut out any background noise. And I'm going to change to speaker view for myself so I can see myself better. The Scrapbook of Frankie Pratt by Caroline Preston is the book that I chose. Graphic novels are really big with children and with young adults, but this is an adult graphic novel. It starts when Frankie Pratt graduates from high school in 1920, and throughout the book, it's just like you're looking at her scrapbook of her times back in 1920. You learn what it was like for her to different fashions. She went to Vassar College. She traveled to New York. How she got a job with True Story magazine. And then she even went to Paris. And of course, she fell in love. So all through this book, the author uses her own ephemeral that she had collected through the years. And it's just really a fun look at what it was like to live back in the 1920s. And I think I like this book so much because my mother was born in 1913, and I can remember as a child looking through her scrapbook, and this book really reminded me of the things that she put in her scrapbook. So it's The Scrapbook of Frankie Pratt, and I'll put that in the chat. Now, I'm trying to figure out how we can I'm just going to call on someone that I see here. So I'm going to call on Conway. Do you have a book to share?
I do, Minetta. I don't have it with me because I read it, borrowed it from the library. It was an ebook. But the title is The Rent Collector, and the author is Cameron Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T. And I see Eleanor shaking her head. I thought it was a wonderful book, and it takes place on a trash heap in Cambodia. And it's a story of hope. And it's also one thing that really pulled me into it was, and I don't want to tell you too much because it was a surprise element for me anyway, maybe you too, Eleanor. It's the relationship that develops between two women, and there's a little bit of a mystery there, and you learn about the other one. There's a mother and a husband with a very sick child, which you can imagine. They're living on a trash dump, literally, in Cambodia, and they're scrounging for food each day. The child is ill and needs medicine, and of course, they can't provide much of that. So it's a struggle. Literature is very important in this book, and that's what pulled me in. And some of the literature that was talked about has me wanting to go get some of those titles, most of which we have read years ago. So I don't want to say anything else about it, but I urge you to read The Rent Collector by Cameron Wright, and I'll put that in the chat too. It's a goodie. Thank you. You're muted, Minetta.
Oh.
You're muted. You're muted.
Okay, it's funny. Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Okay. When it says mute, I'm unmuted. When it's anyway, crazy. Vicki, do you have something to share?
I'm going to recommend two books. They have a common theme. The first one is called Mastering the Art of French Murder. And if you love Paris, if you love Julia Child, this is a really fantastic book. It takes place in 1949 in Paris, right after World War II. And it concerns a young woman living across the street from Julia Child who makes friends with her. And a person is found stabbed with Julia's chef's knife, and the mystery goes on from there. Fabulous book, and it's got a lot of, since I've read a lot about Julia Child, it's got a lot of really interesting anecdotes that I know are pretty authentic. The name of the book, Mastering the Art of French Murder, the author is Colleen Cambridge, and it is the first in a series. The next one's going to be published in a couple of months. But the other one, just because I read cookbooks, is called Boards and Spreads, because we're all doing charcuterie boards and grazing boards and all that stuff. And it's a fabulous cookbook with wonderful pictures of every board. But it also is a lot about how to put things out, how to prepare. And it's called Boards and Spreads by Yasmin Farr, F-A-H-R. So if you like cookbooks and like to read cookbooks, which I do, it's a fabulous new cookbook.
Ooh, they both sound good. Okay. Donna, how about you? Donna Smith.
Okie dokie. You know, sometimes you ever get into a book and it goes too fast and you wish you could just stay there for a little while longer. Well, this is not one of those books. This is The Covenant of Water. It's 700 plus pages long, but it's by Abraham Verghese. And he also wrote another one. They're not connected, but this was really the first. This one came before Cutting for Stone. So if you've read this one's a great follow-up too. I had so many books to choose. I thought of several I'd like to share tonight, but this one, it just, even though it's so long, it just keeps you in it. And he writes such deep stories, and he's a doctor himself, so there's usually something medical to go along in here. And when I first saw this next book of his, and I thought, oh, I don't think I'm quite ready to read that one yet. Let me see what my time is like. But I thought I couldn't resist it, so I got it and did not regret it. So I would highly recommend it. I think Eleanor's read it too. So, good one.
Eleanor, do you have something to share?
Donna, I hadn't read that one, but I read the other one, Cutting for Stone, and it was an excellent book. I am a murder mystery person, psychological thriller. I love those, even though I am petrified of the dark, which surprises me. I'm so afraid of the dark, but and I even like to watch things like, I don't like to watch them on TV as much anymore, but the book I'm not quite through with it. I've got 20 pages left, but it's by Ruth Ware, and I think there's one on the book list that didn't get voted in, but this one's called The Turn of the Key, and it's one of those psychological thrillers. It's about a girl named Rowan who went to be a nanny for a house that's like out in the boondocks, and several things happen. I don't know if anybody's ever read this one or not, but I mean, I don't want to put it down. It's like gets to be 12:30 or 1 o'clock at night, and I'm still like, please, I just got to finish this book. And then when I cut the light out, because it happens and it's pitch dark where it happens and things are happening, I'm like, okay, I don't know if I can go to sleep or not. And so, but anyway, it is, if you like psychological thrillers and things like that, it is a very, if you're one of those people that likes those kinds of books, it's a very, very, very good book that I have really enjoyed. So, and I've read it in like about 3 days. So I just can't put it down. today I was like, I keep my grandbaby, and I was like, I've got to get that grandbaby down to nap so I can read some more. So it's just it's a really good book. So
Thank
and
you.
it
Sounds
you're right.
scary.
Well, it's not. I mean, looking back on it, it's not as scary as I think it is. It's just the way it kind of happens. I mean,
Way it's written.
yes.
Thank you. Okay, Nina Ko, do you have something?
Yes. Uh, I have one that I guess could be called historical fiction. The title is The Day I Met Jesus, The Revealing Diaries of Five Women from the Gospel. So obviously it's faith-based, and this came to me through, we have a group called Connected Women in my church, and we have met together and had breakfast together for several years. And during the pandemic, our leader got us together with a whole bunch of books that we read over that time, especially over the first year where we couldn't get out and couldn't see each other. And so we read the books and then went on Zoom and discussed the books. And this was probably the favorite of, I think, most of us. The Day I Met Jesus, The Revealing Diaries of Five Women from the Gospels. The authors are Frank Viola and Mary DeMuth. It's a refreshing look and kind of gives you a picture of how it was when those women lived. And I don't have in front of me the list of women that are included, but I think you will probably recognize most of them if you know Bible stories.
Sounds like it might go along with the companion piece to The Chosen if you've been watching that.
That's probably so.
Flo, Bishop, do you have something for us tonight? I know you're an avid reader. She's still with us?
Flo?
Yeah.
All right, I see her. Are you frozen, Flo?
Okay.
You're muted. You're muted, Florence.
And I kept pushing it, but nothing was happening. Here I am.
There she is. Hi, Florence.
Hello. I chose number 23 in a series of books because I just enjoy them all. It's a series by Alexander McCall Smith. It's the number one ladies detective agency. And it takes place in Botswana with delightful characters, and where a very not the person you would picture as being a detective starts her own, and with her secretary Grace, it is a delightful book. My favorite, the best I can describe it, is what was written by Los Angeles Times. It said, "Smart and sassy, has the power to amuse or shock or touch the heart, sometimes all at once." And it's number 23, and I've enjoyed every one of them.
I like that series too, particularly the Secretary's Shoes.
Right. The newest one is A Song of Comfortable Chairs.
Okay, Kathy Hudson.
Hi, everybody. I took a slightly different tack for my book. The book I selected is a memoir. It's called Necessary Trouble, and it's by Drew Gilpin Faust, who was a former president of Harvard University during the I think she became president in 2008. 2007 to 2018. And I chose this book because Drew grew up here in Clark County. And she relates in the book her upbringing in the county and how her mother was a very traditional Southern woman, that, a girl didn't need much of an education. She needed a husband. And chronicles her epiphany, basically, as she was being driven home from school one day, from her private school, which was just down the road from the school that I worked at for 30 years. She was driven home from school one day by a Black servant. And she got to talking with him about why there were no Black children in her classes. And it's the story of how she struggled with this issue and how she became an activist in a way. The book chronicles her life from her upbringing to the time she graduated from, it's leaving me now. Radcliffe, was it Radcliffe? Oh gosh, I really did read this book. But I got to hear her speak twice in the last couple of weeks. And, I asked her, I said, will you continue the rest of your story from the time you left college until, I'm sorry, she went to Bryn Mawr. I just remembered, Bryn Mawr in Pennsylvania. I said, will you continue the rest of your story from Bryn Mawr to the present, with maybe some information about what it was like to be president of Harvard and the differences among higher education? And she said, probably not. This is going to be it. She's also written 2 other books that I've both read that are really good. Mothers of Invention, about women during the American Civil War.
Mm.
And This Republic of Suffering, Death in the American Civil War. And I have to say, I'm not a huge Civil War fan, but I enjoy reading about women in American history since we're so often overlooked.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Patsy, do you have something?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I am a former newspaper reporter, photographer, and news editor for the local paper in DeSoto County, Mississippi. We're in North Mississippi. South Haven High School has the distinct honor of having a great writer as a graduate, and that's John Grisham. I remember his strolling through our school, and I had the opportunity to interview him once when he had a court case that I was covering for the newspaper. But we have started a Writers Guild group for North Mississippi. It's called the Northwest Mississippi Writers Guild. It's centered in Olive Branch, Mississippi. I live in Horn Lake, but I attend that guild meeting. I was one of the founding members with several of my friends, including a couple of English teachers who taught John Grisham. But one of our members has published his own book entitled Blue Sunrise. And this is a copy of the book. I don't know if you can see it. There's light shining on it. But Blue Sunrise is rather thick, 450 pages. And this is what I wrote so I could be succinct and not spend too much time. Greg R. Overman, Greggr, the letter R, and then Overman, Overman, is the author of the book Blue Sunrise. It's a science fiction book that is based on real science rather than just fantasy. Outer space aliens named the Koombar, Koombar, have either destroyed or enslaved other planets. Trees in the novel are not like trees we know on Earth. They have intelligence, but they have been enslaved by the Koombar on their planet. Man has landed on the moon to develop it for mining operations. It has been there for many years at this point in the story. It's supposed to be about 50 years ahead. And now the first settlers to Mars from Earth are trying to find water so they can also develop Mars that way. Unfortunately, the Koombar have found them too. And now they know where Earth is. They know that there are intelligent life forms. And will mankind survive their inevitable attack? So far, they just destroy anything that might be, a danger to them. I usually don't like fantasies, but this book is grounded in great physics, geology, and space science. So when I'd go back and look up things to see if these were real things or something he made up, they were real. I usually don't like fantasies, but this book is grounded in great science. They're based on past, present, and future science being used by NASA today. It is well written with characters who have many human flaws. He kept my attention throughout the 450-page book. It took me about 3 weeks to read it in between being busy with real life, but I just couldn't put it down. Overman is a member of the Northwest Mississippi Writers Guild with us in Olive Branch, Mississippi. He lives in Hernando, Mississippi, and owns an industrial soap company in Memphis. He has been a chemist for many years. I think he was born in New Orleans area. The book's sequel is going to be named Blue Sunset. This is Blue Sunrise, but he has finished Blue Sunset, and he has not had it printed yet, but he sent a link online to all of our guild members to look at it before it's even published. And we share ideas and critique one another's work at our meetings once a month. His book will be available on Amazon.com, just like the one Blue Sunrise. The cost of Blue Sunrise is $16.95 on Amazon, and it also has a Kindle version for $4.99. Overman has developed his own website called bluesunrise.net. And I feel that Ray Bradbury and Jules Verne have a kindred spirit in Greg R. Overman. So if you have a chance to read it, I think you'll enjoy it.
Great, thank you. Jennifer Smith.
Hello, everyone. I would like to introduce you to author Catherine Center. That's Catherine with a K, Catherine Center. And she writes fictional books about joy. She writes about resilience and struggle and finding ways to savor life's moments of grace. And I find her books to be inspirational, hopeful, and she also has humor mixed in. She writes about characters who find a way to get back up after they've been knocked down, and I can relate to that. And her most recent book that I really enjoyed, I listened to it on audiobook, so I don't have one to show you. Her books have beautiful, colorful covers. You can get happy just looking at her book covers. The book is narrated by a really good narrator, Patty Murin, if you like audiobooks. But the book has an atmospheric Texas bayou setting. The author, Miss Center, she is from Texas. She grew up in Houston, Texas. And the main character is named Sadie, a young woman who's a portrait artist. Her books tend to have women with good, strong careers. She has the book about a female firefighter, but this character is a portrait artist, and she lives in a rooftop shack in a downtown Houston warehouse converted to a condo. But she has a medical condition which causes her to lose her eyesight, and then that in turn affects her career as a portrait artist. And the book makes me think about how we use our senses in our lives. So she has really good author's notes at the end of the book about the medical condition. So I learned something, even though it's fiction, I learned something also. Two of Catherine Center's books have been made into Netflix movies. Sometimes I like to chill with a Netflix movie. The Lost Husband, and the most recent one, Happiness for Beginners. And I hope you might enjoy reading for joy with the Catherine Center book. And I did really like Things You Save in a Fire. Like I said, that's the one about the female firefighter. So enjoy.
Thank you. You might even put those Netflix titles in, I'm always looking for a good Netflix movie. Judith.
Hi, I have a recommendation of, can you hear me?
Yes.
The book that I'm recommending is called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, Haig. And it's several years old, but I found it very interesting. I received it as a gift, so it wasn't one that I chose, but a friend gave it to me as a gift, and I really liked it. It's a story of a woman who is depressed. And so she's going through a period in her life where she feels hopeless and everything is negative, and she regrets many of the decisions that she's made in her life. And she decides to end her life. And in in that stage when between life and death, she enters the Midnight Library, which is a library filled with books, and each of the books talks about or lays out a period in her life where she made a different decision. So she has options, and it relays or reviews what would have happened had she made that other decision. So she's filled with these regrets. And so she sees what could have happened had she made different decisions. And I won't say much more than that, other than when I was looking at Goodreads, one of the people on Goodreads wrote that this is the best self-help book disguised as fiction.
Oh. Interesting. I read it too. It's good, a good book. Sue, what do you have for us tonight?
Thanks, Minetta. This has been so great. And instead of telling you about my book, I'm going to thank Florence for reminding me of the #1 Ladies Detective Agency and just telling you a little story. So the year before I retired, I dreamed about going to Botswana as my first trip of my retirement. And so a fellow principal gave me the series by Alexander McCall Smith. And I thoroughly loved reading the books. And then when we got to Botswana, of course, it was as beautiful and grand and on safari as we ever hoped it would be. At our last camp, when we arrived, I walked into the dining area and our guide approached me and did the handshake.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh my gosh. And I did the handshake back and I said, is that the way I'm supposed to do it? And he looked at me and he said, how do you know about the handshake? And I said that I had read the books by Alexander McCall Smith, and he had read every one. And he taught me what rooibos tea was. Or bush tea is rooibos tea. Like he gave me so much background to the stories that I had read that it was just a wonderful experience. So thank you, Florence, for this beautiful memory that I'm just totally immersed in right now. And I'm also enjoying everybody else's books. My book really wasn't that exciting because I'm sure you've all read Harlan Coben. I'm embarrassed to say it's my first time reading one of his books. I've watched 3 of his Netflix shows, which I'll put in. But I wanted to share this because this was my first and I'm almost done. And you know what I'll be doing when I get off Zoom tonight. So I'll put this title as well as the titles of the 3 shows that we've watched on Netflix by him. Thank you.
Good. Did you drink some red bush tea also?
Sure did.
Deborah.
Okay. Hi. I don't know. Let me see if you can see this. Can you see the book?
Yes.
Okay. It's Return to Vallejo by Dominic Smith. I kind of saw on Reader's Digest that they had the author actually there, but I was unable to see, but I'm going to go to YouTube. I have about 50 pages. I haven't quite finished it, but I thought it would be interesting. I'm part Italian, so it takes place in a village in Italy, but it's one of those villages that not many people live in anymore because it had like earthquakes and whatnot. So there's during and so there was only about on this in Vallejo, there's only about 10, I think, people that remain. It's these widows. There are 3 eccentric sisters. There's centurion mother who's going to have a 100th birthday party. That's a big thing in the story. And they live in this villa that's in Vallejo. And the nephew and grandson, actually Hugh, comes down to visit, and he usually spends the summer. He's a writer. And this other lady comes in. So it's kind of really complicated, but there's an interesting twist in the story. So it's really interesting read, and I think you'll enjoy it for a fun read. So, Return to Veleto, and it's by Dominic Smith. So I'll put it in the chat. So I hope you'll enjoy it and read. But lots of good stuff in it. So I think it's a good read.
Sounds fun. Sounds like a good one. Gay.
Well, I chose the book Horse by Geraldine Brooks. And I know some of you have read it, Minetta. But I just, the synopsis on the book flap is really tells the crux of it. Inspired by a remarkable true story of the record-breaking thoroughbred Lexington, because it is about a horse. Horse is a novel of art and science, love and obsession, and our unfinished reckoning with racism. It just is a really thought-provoking book, and it goes back and forth between two time periods. 2019 is more modern time, and the two main characters, Theo, a Nigerian American art historian, and he's also, I believe, a graduate student and writer. So interesting character. And then he meets Jess, who is a Smithsonian scientist from Australia. And she works in the lab recreating skeletons and preserving the bones of great big whales and dinosaurs and you name it. So she's a Smithsonian scientist. Those are the two modern characters. And then 1850 is the other setting in Lexington, Kentucky. And the main character is Jarrett, who in the beginning of the story starts out as a young boy. It talks about him at age 5, losing his mother, and his father works on another plantation because they've been split up. They had different owners or got sold, and his father had saved all his money so he could buy his freedom. But Jarrett's mother died, and Jarrett remains a slave. His father was able to convince the man he works for, Dr. Warfield, who breeds and loves racehorses. And Harry Lewis, Jarrett's father, is an incredible trainer. So he was able to purchase his own freedom, but not Jarrett's. And Jarrett does come to live with his father, and Jarrett ends up just becoming a fabulous trainer with horses. So that is based on a true story. There was really a horse named Lexington, who was a very famous racehorse. The two time periods are such different stories and such different character backgrounds, but it's amazing the way the author weaves the story together, and it's so well researched. I really enjoyed it, and I read it with another book club. We had a wonderful discussion, and we really debated about, is this really a story about a horse, or is it really a story about racism? I'll put it in the chat.
I had the opportunity of hearing Geraldine Brooks speak, and it was really wonderful to hear her. And then when she even read a portion of the book, so that was extra fun. And she's won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature for March, but I really liked Horse better than March. So that's just my side. Paula, bring us home.
I'm just glad to be on. We have no internet here, supposedly. My husband can't get anything in the living room, but I'm back here at the computer. I'm afraid to touch anything. Like, I don't know how this is happening, but we're going to just let it be that. Prior to COVID, I was not a big reader. And so when this book club through ADK Connect became a reality, that's kind of when I got really excited about reading and spent a lot of time reading. So I don't have a plethora of books to choose from. However, prior to that, I had read the book called The Rent Collector. Have any of you read The Rent Collector by Cameron Wright? Some of you have? Although the book is fiction. Oh, you have Conway? Conway has read it? Good.
Paula, that's the one I shared tonight.
No. Well, then
Yeah.
I don't have to say anymore. You know that
No,
I will say this then.
You go ahead and put your take on it. 'Cause
Right.
I didn't say very much.
You know, I love to learn something when I'm reading. I'm not much on fiction. I just don't dwell there. I can read it. I like mystery. Hello?
You're there.
Oh, I thought somebody was talking. But I just, when somebody asks me about a book, I do recommend this book because I am just drawn to people who can persevere in living in a dump and scavenging for stuff within it and surviving and thriving and educating themselves. It does overwhelm me, that tenacity of people that truly have within us that really, you don't think you can, but you could if you needed to. So I do think The Rent Collector is worthy of reading. The only other thing that, they've made it into they've, see, what was this that I just learned about? Let me see if I can find that back up. They've adapted it for young readers, Conway. And so, they found that that's worthy for children to read as well, and I think it's a really good story of reality, even though it is fiction by character.
Thank you. So a double recommendation for that tonight.
What can Conway and I say, but
have I missed anyone? Has everyone had a chance to share? Great. Well, we were looking forward to our next discussion read. So Sue, would you kind of inform us of that, please?
I sure will. I also want to remind people to check their spam once in a while. I do try and reach out to everybody for your opportunity to suggest a book. But I often don't hear back. And I think it's probably because my email isn't recognized or it's not familiar. So if you haven't heard from me and ever want to suggest a book, then please feel free to send me an email. But I will keep reaching out to those that I haven't heard a response from. But our next book, it was exciting to have a tie and to have to reach out again. Paula got some additional votes. So our next read that we'll discuss on November 9th is Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jessie Q. Sutanto. Oh, and there's Minetta with it. I'll put it in the message as well, or in the chat.
Sue, you can go on ADK Connect and make messages directly to people, and that might be a good way to connect with them. You have a way to make a message to person.
Good thinking. I'll try that next time.
That just hit me. Okay. And that might get you connected with them.
Perfect. Thanks, Paula.
Okay, well, thanks to all of you for adding to our recipe and having a good taste. Kathy, you have something to say.
I kind of have an addendum to the last discussion. I enjoyed Miss Eliza's English fiction so much. And I looked through the bibliography of, sources that she used, because I'm such a librarian nerd and I read bibliographies. And I ended up finding a book of her poems by Eliza Acton. Granted, it's not in a very exciting format, but it does have some of her poems, or all of her poems, I guess. And then I got a copy of Eliza Acton's book, Modern Cookery in All Its Branches. And she wrote a second book about baking or bread or something like that. And it's a very dense cookbook, shall we say. I don't think it would be user-friendly, but I've always, wondered about Mrs. Beaton and Eliza Acton and all the people that, I have read so much about before. And then another book caught my eye, and that was before Mrs. Beaton. by Elizabeth Raffald, and it's England's most influential housekeeper. And it talks about the women who worked in the field. I haven't read this yet, but it is on my TBR pile. Just wanted to follow up with that.
Thank you. It's fun when you find a book and then you can play off of that and find some other things.
I call it sending me down the reading rabbit hole.
Right. And I go down them too often. Yes, Gay.
As people noticed, I did record this session. A few people had emailed me and asked if it would be recorded. So possibly this can maybe be put on Connect. You know how wonderful technology
we would
I
need
am.
to check with, we need to check with Mary I.
Okay.
Yeah, just check with Mary I, because I have no idea. I know that you can put an attachment on here, but I don't know anything other than that.
Okay.
Jennifer.
I'm keeping a list of all the recommendations, so I will type that up in the next day or two, and I'll put that on Connect too, so you can have a running list of the names of the books and authors in case you didn't get good
Thank
note.
you. And that way, people who couldn't join us tonight also will have a nice reading list to go through. Again, we thank everyone.
I didn't know how to list mine. I saw people were listing theirs, but I didn't know how to do it. So I'm not very technological. So
just in the chat box at the bottom in the chat, if you just click on chat, and then you can type in your author and your title and author.
Okay. Who was that talking? I want to make sure
that was Eleanor.
Okay. And what is Eleanor?
And that was the Blue Sunrise,
no,
right?
it was Ruth Ware.
The Turn of the Key. Okay, that was someone else. Okay. I was like, Patsy was right underneath you. It was that was Patsy's book. Yeah. The Turn of the Key.
Eleanor, what's your last name?
Ivester, Ivester.
Okay, thank you. I'll put the name of the ladies who recommended the books also.
Okay,
so we'll thank them again after we read them.
Okay, thank you all so much for joining us. I think we have a nice selection of books to read from. And the Pages and Pearls Committee, if you will stay for a few minutes, we will talk about what we need to talk about for the next time. All right, thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Minetta.
Thank you. And thanks, Gay, for your persistence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for your grace and forgiveness.
We were just glad you were doing it. Technology is wonderful, but you know, there are glitches and they just happen. You know,
I've got no service.
You know, usually it's when the principal is walking in to observe you. So I've had that happen. And just punt and go on. What was I going to say? I was going to say something, forgot what it was. But that's okay. Great. Okay, so November 9th, we're set for our discussion with our book. It looks really good. I went ahead and ordered it from Amazon. And I'm excited. I always like mysteries, so I'm excited about that one, you know, to go with that. And I don't remember, I don't have in front of me who the host will be that day. Paula?
Gay, can you unrecord the meeting now? Is there a way to do that?
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Good thinking.
It just came up, you're being recorded. Like, well, we don't need to record this. Can you all give me like I've got a cat that wants his treat, and it's after